Nike just got sued for $500 million, not by a corporation, not by a celebrity with a PR team and a calculated agenda. By a 2-3-year-old girl from the Philippines holding a tennis racket in one hand and the most explosive lawsuit in sports history in the other. And before you think this is just another athlete drama, stop. Because what happened behind closed doors before that lawsuit was filed is the part nobody is talking about. Do you think Nike just woke up one morning and decided to destroy the career of their own generational investment? Keep watching, because the answer will genuinely disturb you. Alex Eala didn't arrive quietly. She didn't build her name slowly through years of forgettable tournament finishes and polite press conferences. She arrived the way lightning arrives, no warning, no build-up, just sudden, blinding, impossible to ignore. Born in Manila, raised with a racket almost before she could walk, Eala wasn't manufactured by some elite European academy or pushed by parents chasing glory. She was forged, through losses that would have broken anyone else, through a discipline so fierce it bordered on obsession, through a cultural identity that made every single victory feel like it belonged to an entire nation, not just one young woman standing on a court. By 16, coaches across Europe were whispering her name in private conversations. By 17, she had claimed junior Grand Slam titles that most professional players never touch in their entire careers. The Roland Garros junior title didn't just announce her arrival, it announced a dominance that felt almost unsettling for someone so young. But here's what separated Eala from every other overhyped junior prospect the tennis world had seen before. It wasn't just her talent. It was her presence. That rare, completely undefinable quality that makes cameras gravitate toward a player before she even hits a ball. That makes crowds hold their breath between points. That makes opponents feel the psychological weight of her before the first serve lands. Tennis analysts started drawing comparisons to legends. Filipino media erupted with a pride that went far beyond sport. This wasn't just a tennis player winning matches. This was national identity crystallized into a backhand winner, a perfectly timed drop shot, a fist pump that felt like a declaration to the entire world. And Nike noticed. Of course Nike noticed. Corporations sitting on $50 billion empires don't miss athletes like Eala. Their talent scouts, their marketing departments, their brand strategists, they had already identified her trajectory before most mainstream audiences had even learned to pronounce her name correctly. They saw the social media engagement numbers climbing. They saw the demographic appeal. A young, articulate, deeply passionate athlete representing Southeast Asia, one of the fastest growing markets Nike had been aggressively pursuing for years. The sponsorship deal wasn't charity. It wasn't goodwill. It was a calculated business investment in what Nike's internal projections reportedly classified as a generational brand asset. Think about what that phrase actually means. Not seasonal. Not promising. Generational. They didn't sign Eala because they believed in her potential, they signed her because their own data told them she was going to be inevitable. So ask yourself this right now: what force on earth could convince Nike to walk away from a generational investment? The day that deal was signed, the Philippines didn't just celebrate, they erupted. Hashtags trended for 72 consecutive hours. Politicians congratulated her publicly. And somewhere in Manila, children posted videos online wearing handmade Nike logos on their shirts because they couldn't afford the real ones, but they wanted to belong to the moment anyway. That single image said everything. Those handmade logos weren't about a sponsorship, they were about a symbol. For Eala personally, the Nike deal represented something deeply psychological that every athlete understands in their core. It was the world's most powerful institution looking directly at you and saying your future is worth betting everything on. It quieted every internal doubt. Every 4 a.m. training session that whispered whether the sacrifice was worth it suddenly felt completely justified. But behind closed doors, whispers were already beginning to circulate almost immediately after the ink dried. Sources close to the situation, people who occupied significant positions within professional tennis's commercial ecosystem and who would only speak under strict anonymity, described an atmosphere of growing tension surrounding Eala's presence in the WTA's competitive landscape. And here is the part that should make every one of you genuinely angry. It wasn't tension about her performance. It wasn't concerns about her professionalism or her conduct. It was something far more uncomfortable. Eala was winning. Consistently. Increasingly. At a pace that was disrupting carefully constructed competitive narratives surrounding other players with deeper establishment connections, longer histories within the WTA's political infrastructure, more strategically convenient brand stories for Western-facing marketing campaigns. In professional sports, inconvenient success creates enemies that polite conversation never acknowledges out loud. Do you think powerful institutions play fair when their financial interests are threatened? Watch what happens next. The warning signs appeared gradually at first, almost imperceptibly. Nike's social media team, typically aggressive in promoting sponsored athletes after significant results, began responding to Eala's victories with unusual silence. Posts were delayed. Celebration content that standard protocol demanded appeared either diminished or completely absent. Internal communications that would normally amplify a sponsored athlete's breakthrough performances reportedly went strangely quiet. Then came the contractual conversations that Eala's management found increasingly alarming. Renegotiation discussions that should have been straightforward celebrations of a rising star's trajectory instead became tense. Evasive exchanges where Nike representatives deflected direct questions about long-term commitment with corporate language designed specifically to obscure rather than clarify. Something was changing. Something invisible, institutional, and deeply political. And Eala, perceptive, intelligent, emotionally aware far beyond her years, felt every single tremor of it. Nobody announced it ceremonially. Nobody issued a respectful press release. Nike simply disappeared. One morning, the partnership that had symbolized a nation's pride, that had inspired thousands of Filipino children to dream bigger than their circumstances allowed, simply ceased to exist. Contracts terminated. Communication channels severed. The swoosh vanished from Eala's equipment with cold, clinical corporate efficiency. No warning, no farewell, no dignity. The silence itself became the statement. Within 3 hours of the first report surfacing through tennis industry insiders, social media transformed into a battlefield. The central question burning across every platform, every comment section, every tennis forum wasn't how the deal ended, it was why. Because the timing made absolutely no logical commercial sense. Her performance metrics weren't declining, they were accelerating. Her global visibility wasn't shrinking, it was expanding. Her demographic appeal across Southeast Asia represented exactly the market penetration Nike's Asian operations had spent years pursuing. Canceling her partnership at this precise moment contradicted every rational business calculation Nike's executives supposedly applied to athlete investment decisions. Unless the decision wasn't rational. Unless it wasn't purely commercial. Unless someone had made a phone call. Tennis industry journalists began reporting fragments of an increasingly troubling narrative. Multiple sources from distinctly separate corners of professional tennis's commercial world independently described communications occurring between WTA-affiliated figures and Nike representatives during the weeks directly preceding the cancellation. The alleged pressure campaign reportedly operated through suggestion rather than explicit demand, the preferred methodology of institutional power, because it creates plausible deniability while achieving identical outcomes. Conversations framed as expressing concerns about brand alignment. Questions raised about long-term strategic fit that contained no specific accusations but communicated unmistakable intent to anyone sophisticated enough to decode institutional language. Nike, despite its enormous independent power, operates within professional tennis's ecosystem in ways that make WTA relationships genuinely consequential. Tournament access. Official partnership designations. Preferred positioning in WTA-affiliated commercial opportunities. These represent real financial value that sophisticated brand managers weigh carefully against the perceived cost of defying institutional preferences. The calculation allegedly wasn't close. And Eala paid the price for a political equation she had no knowledge of and no opportunity to influence. So here is the question nobody inside that ecosystem wants you to keep asking: if this is how they treated someone the entire world was watching, what happened to the ones nobody was watching? Eala's management team, upon learning these reports, reportedly went through a very specific emotional progression. Initial disbelief, then recognition, then something that transformed almost immediately into absolute unwavering resolve. They began documenting everything. Every communication, every timestamp, every contractual clause, every promise made and subsequently abandoned. Every instance where Nike's behavior directly contradicted what their signed agreement explicitly required. Because Eala wasn't going to disappear quietly into a footnote. She wasn't going to accept institutional erasure with the graceful silence that powerful organizations typically expect from athletes who lack the resources or courage to resist. She was building something, and the tennis world had absolutely no idea what was coming. The number landed like a detonation, $500 million, not a symbolic gesture. Not a modest claim designed to extract a quiet settlement and vanish from headlines. $500 million in damages, filed through legal representatives whose credentials and track record in high-stakes sports law immediately communicated one thing to everyone reading: this was not theater. This was war. Eala's legal team constructed allegations spanning multiple categories of claimed wrongdoing. Contractual breach claims focused on specific obligations. Nike allegedly violated promotional commitments, communication requirements, minimum engagement standards embedded within the original partnership agreement. But the allegations escalated far beyond standard breach of contract territory. Claims of tortious interference pointed directly at WTA-affiliated entities whose alleged communications with Nike constituted actionable disruption of Eala's contractual rights. Discrimination claims added a dimension that reverberated across the entire sporting world. Assertions that her treatment reflected patterns inconsistent with how Nike managed relationships with sponsored athletes from Western nations and historically dominant tennis demographics. The $500 million figure wasn't arbitrary. Direct financial losses from terminated contracts, projected future earnings disruption, reputational damages quantified through commercial valuation methodologies. Punitive damages designed to reflect the severity of alleged institutional misconduct rather than mere compensation for documented losses. Every agent, every brand manager, every tournament director maintaining sponsorship relationships read that filing and felt one very specific thing: exposure. Because if Eala's allegations survive preliminary legal challenges and proceed toward discovery, the documents that surface through that process wouldn't just illuminate her individual situation. They would illuminate how the entire system operates. And powerful institutions never fear individual lawsuits as much as they fear the transparency that genuine legal proceedings force into the light. Was $500 million about money? Or was it about making the darkness visible? Here is the question this story leaves burning in the air, the question tennis's power structure desperately hopes you'll stop asking before demanding real answers. If it takes a $500 million lawsuit to make a sports institution treat a young woman from the Philippines with basic contractual dignity, what does that tell you about every single athlete who didn't have the resources, the courage, or the documentation to fight back? Those athletes existed. They still exist. And nobody filed anything on their behalf. Do you think Eala made the right move going to war with Nike, or do you think this ends badly for her? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because this story is far from over, and the next move could change professional tennis forever.